Welcome to week 2 of Humanities 2249. My name is Mansoor, your instructor for this semester. I hope you're enjoying the course so far. In this week, we're covering the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment is what is broadly being covered in chapters 24 and 25 of your book by Gloria K. Fierro, The Humanistic Tradition. What is the Enlightenment, or what was the Enlightenment? First off, some periodization. The Enlightenment began roughly in the 1740s, about 100 years after the scientific revolution. The Enlightenment was a period where men and women in Europe began to question the traditional sources of authority, namely both the Protestant and Catholic churches of Europe, began to question the validity of their rulers, and furthermore, as inspiration, used the methods of science to not only understand the world that they lived in, but also how to make it a better world. So before we look at the Enlightenment in a little bit more detail, we want to try to understand what the scientific revolution in general was about. First off, science has a 4,000-year history, going back to the Mesopotamians, the Egyptians, and the Chinese. And broadly speaking, science, or scienta, means knowledge. Knowledge based on observation and computation. If that's what science means, then science has been going on for thousands of years in some form. What distinguished the science of the 1600s from science prior to that was the use of systematic observation. Systematic observation, not common sense. I'm sure many of you have heard the phrase, it's common sense. Well, it turns out that common sense isn't so sensible. Let's give an example. If you were to look at the floor below you right now, I'm assuming there's a floor beneath you, and that floor is solid, right? Or how about walls, like walls behind you? Most of us would say those walls and your floor is solid space, right? And if I told you that this wall or that floor was mostly empty space, most of you would think I was a little crazy. Unless, of course, you're a physicist. Physicists have uncovered the secrets of the minute, right, at the atomic, subatomic level. And what have they discovered? They've discovered that, in fact, what we consider to be solid matter turns out to be 99.999% empty space. That's right, you heard it, empty space. So it turns out that common sense isn't so sensible, right? And in fact, I think that was one of the realizations of the fathers of the scientific method, namely Francis Bacon. It was Francis Bacon in the 1600s who wrote the New Method, also known as Novum Organum. And in the New Method, Francis Bacon set out a chart for a new way of exploring the world. And the first thing he said we needed to do was to account for our own flaws. Our own flaws. And what are those flaws, he said? Our propensity to believe in words, our limited human nature. Case in point, right? That wall is solid to us. And the only reason why it appears solid is because all the light that hits it, that bounces back, presents a solid figure. And, more importantly, when we try to press our hand through this wall, we don't go through the wall, right? At least most of us can't do that. But the reason why our hands can't go through the wall is because of weak or electromagnetic force, which is, by the way, very strong. Electromagnetic force is so strong that it's the reason we don't go through the earth when we fall down. So what turns out to be common sense isn't so sensible after all. So Francis Bacon, in his new method, said that there were various flaws in our reasoning based on our human limitations, such as our inability to see the world as it actually is, our limitations due to culture, our limitations due to words. Words can inject bias in our minds, as well as received systems of thought, what he called dogmas. So in order to liberate ourselves from these dogmas, Francis Bacon asserted the need for a method which rose gradually, or to quote Francis Bacon, resulted from an, quote, ascent. An ascent. And that ascent, notice how I'm gradually moving my hand up, was gradual. So you don't jump to broad conclusions based on limited learning. So that's one of the pillars of the scientific method. In fact, if you're in science right now, those of you in this class who are in nursing or any of the applied sciences know that science, experimental science, is based on systematic testing, which accounts for other possibilities, right? Discounts for other possibilities. Like, for example, the placebo effect. Like, for example, the bias of the tester and the testee. So you have to discount for all of these things and many more to make sure that the results you're getting aren't flawed. This system or method has its origins all the way back to the 1600s with Francis Bacon. Systematic method of observation. That's the first pillar of science. The second pillar of science is mathematical computation. And this begins in earnest with Kepler. With Kepler, actually even Copernicus before him was doing it. What separated Kepler from Copernicus was the fact that Kepler decided to use math with observation. Kepler was the one who discovered that the orbits of planets around any star, namely ours, can be best described as ellipses, not circles. Okay? So the two pillars of science, modern science, are systematic observation and mathematical computation of those observations, from which we get laws. Sir Isaac Newton, in his Philosophia Naturalis Principia Mathematica, also known as Principia Mathematica, laid out the general laws of physics that would hold sway until the 20th century. The laws of gravity, the laws of motion, and the laws of force. So, and Newton posited these laws in the 1600s. So when the 1700s roll around in France, in England, in Spain, men known as and women by the way, known as the philosophes, or thinkers, said to themselves and to others, if science using observation and math can be applied to the natural world, that is the world outside of human affairs, then why can't we apply that to human affairs too? Why can't we apply that to the study of the mind, or to the study of political governance, or to the study of how people live collectively? And why not use that science to make the world a better place, to unshackle it from quote-unquote superstition and ignorance? Now, before you walk away saying, what's the big deal with all of that? Ask yourself, when you look at the computer that you're staring at right now, or the phone in probably in some cases, what is that the consequence of? Ask yourself that question. Where did that iPhone come from? Where's all the smart technology coming from? It is the legacy of the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment. The other major legacy of the Enlightenment, by the way, is our country, the United States of America. the system of government we have with our checks and balances, is the legacy of the thoughts of John Locke, as some of you are studying right now, the legacy of the political theories of Montesquieu. The educational system we have, by and large, is the beneficiary of Rousseau, even though much of Rousseau's thought has been discarded as sexist and racist. There are still segments of his thought that pertain to us today. Namely, the idea that children need to be treated like children and not like little adults. That children can be molded based on their education. Our entire educational system is built on that premise. Okay. So the philosophers were telling the people of their time that the world could be made a better place through the application of reason and observation. And by reason we mean logic and math, to understand our world. And to not just accept whatever has been handed on to us as fact or truth. Rather, what we should do is we should check it out for ourselves, to have a skeptical mindset. That doesn't mean we disregard everything we see. It means we question it, and we just don't take it at face value. This is another, by the way, legacy of the Enlightenment. It was the famous philosopher Immanuel Kant who said, quote unquote, dare to know. And so I dare you to know this semester. I dare you to go and for yourself examine the world you live in. Moving on to chapter 25 now. The Enlightenment was a period of promise, of exploration. After all, during the Enlightenment, much of the world had been discovered by Europeans, if you'd like. And I'm using the word discovery with quotes because other civilizations had already, to some extent, done that. It was a period of promise, of exploration, a period of science, a period also of human rights, as we are examining in our books. But it was also a period of slavery. It was also a period of great poverty. It was a period of sexism. The ideals of the Enlightenment were not being applied to women and to African Americans and to other persons who were not of European ancestry. In fact, the notion that all people or all men are created equal really applied to white men and did not include women and minorities. And I think the next 400 years, 350 years of history has been about this struggle, the struggle for equality. Now, that said, the Enlightenment had within it the seeds or the kernels of truth about the proposition that we can, through our reason, understand that we are born free with certain unalienable rights, the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And again, the last 350 years or so have been an exercise in that struggle. Of course, I just want to play contrarian for a minute and ask you the following question. Is it really reason which gives us these rights? Or is it human convention? Or is it God? And I think the answer to this and to these questions is very important to how we decide to go about with rights in general. After all, if rights are not based on reason, but by fiat or by the will of the people, then all rights are man-made by convention, without any objective referent. But if rights are based on some objective truth, be it reason or be it reason and God, then our rights have some objective meaning to them. By the way, this is not to suggest that any of these 3 or 4 possibilities I suggested is true. I'm just saying that the philosophical foundation upon which we rest the notion of rights is very, very important. And that's all I have for you for week 2. I wish you all the best this semester. Thank you.